that J.J. Abrams has nailed it. One more quick point, and then we'll just get to in the few minutes that we have left in the podcast this week, talk a little bit about the dark side, and that is that the publishing company for the novelization of The Force Awakens has agreed to delay printing up copies of the book. It was supposed to be available the day the movie came out, but it turns out now that they are going to delay that because most everybody knows that once the book goes to print, there will be copies available to people online, and they want to keep the movie as secretive as possible before it gets released. So it really seems like that was sort of the one thing that everybody was waiting for those fans who are following the websites and the message boards going, well, hey, when the book comes out, we're going to know everything, right? We'll know what's going on. It turns out, nope, that's not going to happen. They're going to delay the release of the book until, well, at least the printing of it will probably take place closer to the film's release, if not the week of the film's release, so the book comes out shortly afterwards with a quick turnaround with no possibility of it leaking before then.
There has been an awakening. Have you felt it?
All right, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the dark side.
The dark side.
Again, this was something that I wanted to talk about, and my mood was actually more of in a dark side kind of mood, just because of things that have been going on in my life. And I wanted to get into a little bit of the dark side, and it's funny to see the fandom, the fan community, really either embrace, Empire or Rebel, and you go to the conventions and you see the tattoos and you see what people wear and what people gravitate towards. There is something seductive about both sides of the dark side and the light side of the Force. I think at the end of the day, if you ask me, I probably fall more on being a fan of the dark side, or the elements of the dark side, the dark nature of the Force. You can't have one without the other. And it is a part of, the mythology that takes place in all the major religions, all the stories of old. You have to have a good, you have to have a bad, and I just like watching the dark side and watching it unfold, and motivations, and why people end up succumbing to it. Because look, in my opinion, we're bad before we're good. It's a lot easier to be bad than it is to be good. We have to strive to be good people. So it's almost as if the dark side is somewhat more relatable than the light side is. And it's something that the Star Wars mythology that George Lucas has created has really tapped into with this dark side and the light. And I can't wait to see what the new incarnation is of the dark side and the light when it comes to the new movie. It's interesting too, because everything's been dark side, light side. You've heard a Jedi in the trailer, but you really haven't heard, Sith. When Han Solo in the trailer itself talks about the stories, we've heard these stories, it's true, all of it, the dark side, a Jedi. And it really seems like that's how they're going to position this, because we have a new dark side now, right? We have what we believe is we have the First Order, which may or may not be more dark side element focused than we saw the Empire to a certain extent in terms of the religion. We certainly have Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren, and we don't know exactly yet who they are, although the Rebels, the latest Rebels episode, may lend some clues to that. If you think about the Inquisitors showing that there is a pathway to the dark side apart from being a Sith, because these Inquisitors have tapped into it. When you look at the names of the two Inquisitors that have taken the place of the Grand Inquisitor that was killed in the first season, the fifth brother and the seventh sister. So you get this idea that there are more dark side users out there than what we are typically used to seeing in the Star Wars movies with the rule of two and the Sith. So if that's the case, and the Sith adhere to the rule of two, then they wouldn't necessarily be out there training other dark side users. So who ended up training the Inquisitors? And could we be seeing a precursor to who the Knights of Ren will be in The Force Awakens? Now, let me sort of go backwards to the beginning of the original trilogy and sort of work our way through. And let me just make some points about the dark side from the movies and things that stick out to me. You didn't really see you saw the Darth Maul and the dark side and Darth Sidious in the Phantom Menace, but you didn't really see that come out in the child Anakin. George Lucas really kept him more grounded, more focused, more like a little kid, apart from my name's Annie, I'm not a slave, they're that kind of thing. There wasn't really any indications that this kid was going to be wholly evil, because you had to like him to begin with, right? So to make him a bully and a brat at a young age didn't really serve the story very well. Getting into Attack of the Clones, then things begin to open up a bit. You get into Attack of the Clones and you see Anakin and his fear about losing his mom, and really, in talking about implication, and even not even implication, just seeing it take place on screen, the wiping out of the Tusken Raiders. You're not talking about him wiping out a group of people, because I think as viewers we see the Tusken Raiders more as animals, and Anakin even says that to a certain extent, almost giving you a free pass to not see him as fully being completely evil yet, right? And saying, I slaughtered them like animals, I hate them, even though he says the women and the children too. You begin to see the elements and how he begins to turn. The story is really good. It's funny, listening to people that don't like the prequel trilogy, most of them are quick to go and talk about how good the story was. They just didn't like the execution. And I think a lot of that there's some truth to that, and some of that could be attributed to George Lucas's unwillingness to really work with the actors. But the story was really good. I mean, the setup and dynamic that led Anakin to the dark side, whether it was losing his mom, and then the dreams and the visions and the fear of losing Padme and how much he loved her. I think the only place where that really got tripped up was that you wanted to see a different dynamic rather than the being on Naboo with the waterfalls and the silly in the grass scene. I know that George is playing on sort of old movie tropes in being on the nose of the playfulness of their relationship, but I think there could have been a little bit more intensity. One of my favorite scenes in Attack of the Clones is the scene where they're by the fire. I think the dialogue in that scene is one of the worst, even though it's one of my favorite scenes, when he says, I wish I could just wish away my feelings. You just kind of scratch your head and go, you couldn't come up with something better than repeating wish and wish? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, certainly by the time we get to Revenge of the Sith, and even using the Clone Wars to a certain extent as a backdrop leading into Revenge of the Sith, and tying in the two, and sort of envisioning Anakin in Revenge of the Sith based off of who we got to know in the Clone Wars, it's a tragic story. And at least I do, I buy into his seduction and how well Palpatine brought him to the dark side in that speech during Squid Lake, right? Talking about Darth Plagueis, that has caused so much controversy all these years later. And of course, resulting in the reveal of Darth Sidious and him taking out Mace Windu and Darth Sidious essentially, killing Mace Windu, and that bringing over Anakin to the dark side. I think that all plays off really well. All right, I'm really short on time, so I'm going to have to blast through this quickly. But the one point I wanted to make was, and again, going back to the implication, as a kid growing up, A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, the way that they showed the dark side and portrayed the dark side, I remember as a kid being just terrified of Darth Vader. And of course, as an adult, you watch it, and it was all implied. Sure, you had the scene at the beginning of A New Hope where he grabs the guy by his neck and chokes him and throws him to the side. I mean, the implication there is he killed him, right? I mean, how brutal is that? You have the choking scene, Vader release him on the Death Star. But it really wasn't until Empire Strikes Back where anytime Vader was up on screen and somebody who was a part of the Empire, an Imperial, screwed up, you didn't know if they were going to live or die. Including the very end of the movie, which I love, is that moment when they escape right after the rescue on Bespin, and you think that he's going to take out. You think that he's going to take out that member of the Imperial Army, right? Was it Captain Nita, Admiral Nita? And he doesn't. You're kind of like, oh boy, he lucked out, right? And then, of course, you get to Return of the Jedi, and you see evil personified in Emperor Palpatine, Darth Sidious. I mean, we're talking grim stuff. Most of it's in the implication, but it is grim. And as a kid, it really worked. And you were terrified of these characters, and terrified of Darth Vader, which made his eventual redemption at the hand of Luke Skywalker all that much more meaningful and poignant. You know, it makes me wonder what it is we are going to see in The Force Awakens. Adam Driver has said that his character is one where, you know, there's confusion there. Does he, believe what he's doing is wrong? Domhnall Gleeson said about his character in an interview, he said it in sort of a glib comedic fashion, but even he said, everybody get on the same page. They think that you're doing the right thing. Are these guys tapped into the dark side, but they feel like they're doing so justifiably? Rey, I don't think we're going to see the dark side the way we did in Empire until Episode 8. I think it's going to have more of a New Hope type of tone, where Rey is going to be sort of the opposite of what Luke was, where Luke was ready to go and embrace the Force. Rey is going to reject it until the time is right. And I think that we'll see a mirroring in this trilogy of the original trilogy, and that middle trilogy that Rian Johnson, the middle movie, Episode 8, that Rian Johnson is working on, is going to be the one where you see the evil really begin to appear. And I think they're keeping Snoke hidden for a very specific reason. And I think it's because it's a character that they want to reveal on the screen, and he's going to have a pivotal role in the future movies. All right, that just about does it for this week's My Nerd World Star Wars podcast. Thanks so much for joining the podcast and for downloading the podcast. As always, please follow me on iTunes, give the podcast a rating, and drop a comment. If you want to email me, same email address, justice, the number's 1041, at gmail.com. Justice, the number's 1041 at gmail.com. So until next week, and episode 26, may the Force be with you always.
My Nerd World.